of French President Emmanuel Macron after the passage of Cyclone Chido, which devastated much of the territory. Over 500 affected families were forced to abandon their homes and take refuge in a school. These families expressed their dissatisfaction with the actions of the head of state to deal with the emergency, which devastated entire communities and left the residents of the localities without basic services. After the announcement of the president's visit to the area, the inhabitants consider that the money he will spend on this trip will be more useful in the hands of the affected people.
I would like to ask the state if this is the case in all the French regions, or is it only in Mayotte that it has abandoned the island. Mayotte does not necessarily need your presence. What Mayotte needs is your help, your support. What you have spent coming here, from Paris to Mayotte, would have been much better used to help the population.
We had a tragedy. We lost my brother. We are here. This is my mother. She was in the hospital. She wanted to stay, but the hospital kicked her out. She wanted to stay because she had nowhere to go and her son died. She left the hospital and everyone is here. We have not been able to take my brother's body out of the hospital because there is a lot of paperwork to do, and on top of that we have to pay to recover the body.
Also in the U.S., thousands of workers at Amazon facilities across the country went on a strike held in Oregon ahead of the busy holiday given the given season. The nationwide action follows Amazon's repeated refusal to obey the law and bargain with its workers, who organize with the Teamsters Union, which represents some 10,000 workers around the country. Workers at the New York facility became the first Amazon employee to autonomize in April 2022, with several other sites since following suit. As a result, the Amazon workers voted in June to affiliate with the Teamsters. However, the company has repeatedly sought to block the unionization effort, with legal proceedings still ongoing, which prompted the workers to strike. The situation at the height of the holiday season might result in many U.S. families not getting Christmas gifts this year. Recently, the northern Gaza Strip, particularly the Jabalia refugee camp, as well as Gaza City, have witnessed heavy shelling by the Israeli regime. Our correspondent Jorge Gassi.
En el día de hoy podemos decir que la zona norte de la Franja de Gaza, concretamente el campo de refugiados de Jabalia,
refugee camp, as well as Gaza City, have witnessed major atrocities and bombings by the Israeli regime. First of all, the attacks that have been carried out in the northern Gaza Strip, specifically in the Jabalia refugee camp, where it is reported the killing of more than 10 civilians, members of a family, the family of Al-Najjar, where the army of the occupation bombed them in the early hours of the morning, causing the death of 10 members of the same family, in addition to the injury of dozens of people. Dozens of people were reported in the Gaza City. First of all, it's important to highlight the attack on the Zaitouna family, where at least 6 victims were reported in the northern part of Gaza City. Also reported attacks on 2 schools in the west of Gaza City, where the total number of victims in these attacks on these 2 schools have already exceeded 13, and even this number of victims is not definitive. There are still victims under the rubble, and these schools served as refuge for hundreds of Gazans that the Israeli army has bombed them directly. In addition, these are not the first schools that are being attacked. More than 190 schools are reported to have been attacked since the beginning of the genocidal war. Also reported is the attack on the Al-Shatta camp, also the northern Gaza Strip, on a group of people who were at a fountain filling drinking water, and where in that attack that bombed that group of people, more than 10 Gazans have died, and therefore we can say that since early morning until now in the northern Gaza Strip, over 40 victims have been reported. Heading to the center of the Gaza Strip, there is also reported an attack on the Al-Nusayrat refugee camp, camp where at least 4 people were killed by this Zionist entity. And also, throughout the day, there have been reports of artillery shells being fired by the tanks of the army occupation in the central and southern part of the Gaza Strip. Now, let's talk a little bit about the news of this new proposal that is active of humanitarian truce between the Israeli regime and the Hamas movement, where in recent weeks have been carrying out various meetings and negotiations between these two entities, especially in the Egyptian capital of Al Cairo, as well as in Qatar, and where right now the news are quite contradictory. On the one hand, there is talk of a great possibility of reaching an agreement, even there is talk that 90% of the demands of these negotiations are closed totally, and only 10% remains to be discussed in these weeks. And even Israeli and Hebrew sources assure that in less than 2 weeks this agreement could be signed. But on the other hand, there are talks that said that there are different points and demands that have not been agreed, and the Israeli regime and Hamas regarding the number of hostages that will be released in the first phase. And of course, the withdrawal of the army and the occupation of Gaza and the possibility of the end of the war. Since we're talking about the fact that these negotiations is not mentioning the end of the war nor the end of the withdrawal of the occupation, but a humanitarian truce and a partial withdrawal and repositioning of the army of Israel. The details that have arisen of this proposal show that we are talking of a truce proposal of different phases. The first phase, we would talk about a humanitarian truce of approximately 7 weeks, in which the Hamas movement should release 18 Israeli hostages, and in exchange, the Israeli regime should release 100 Palestinian prisoners. But according to Israeli and Hebrew sources, the main drawback is that Israel is asking for more hostages to be released in the Gaza Strip, Israeli hostages. And on the other hand, there also talks about the fact that Hamas is asking for the name of Palestinians perpetual sentence to be released. So we can see the news that are not clear, there is contradiction, and these news are coming from Israeli sources and Hebrew sources, and therefore we must wait for the official statements either from the cabinet of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as the official statements from the Palestinian Islamic Resistance Movement, Hamas.
In the U.S., a state of emergency was declared after the first serious case of bird flu was confirmed in the country. The Southwest Louisiana resident over the age of 65 is hospitalized in critical condition after being exposed to sick and dead birds in a backyard floods. In this regard, the state of California declared a measure that due to the spread of the virus in dairy industry livestock in the territory after it was detected on the dairy farms in the Central Valley. The measure that has been taken to ensure that state agencies have the resources and flexibility they need to quickly respond to this outbreak.